small opportunity uh, has been made available due to a law that was passed that is going into effect for July 1st. And Mark, if you could advance us.
Hey Donna, you're kind of coming in. I don't know if you're on speakerphone, um, but sometimes those will clip you off at the beginning and the end of a sentence.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. Well, if you could advance us. So the new definition, it really changed, the law changed the definition of small group. And so rather than, we're going to explain exactly what was laid out in the legislation, and then we're going to go through some practical examples of different types of uh, sole proprietors or sole company owners that will now qualify for small group coverage that may have only had individual market coverage available to them before. The effective date, first effective date available is 7/1. Um, we are quoting now for the newly eligible groups. We're going to be taking those as we do the rest of our small group, uh, new group submissions up through the 10th of July. So there is still time to get those in for the first effective date. This is going to be the same process going forward as any other small group. So any effective date of the year. So there is no open enrollment per se, or any limitations on the time of year a group like that qualifies now could be written. So it's just an expansion of the small group definition as you know it. So all those same small group uh, rules and underwriting guidelines apply. Can you advance us, please? So the new Virginia definition, and again, this is specific to Virginia, so the federal ACA definition has not changed. So this is something unique for our state. But the definition of small employer has now been expanded to include self-employed individual. And they went through and defined very clearly, you know, who qualifies as a self-employed individual. You must derive a substantial portion of your income from a trade or business. You have to operate that business. It's operated by the individual as sole proprietor, through which the individual has attempted to earn taxable income. So even if there is a loss shown to the business, for example, as long as the individual has filed with their 1040, the Schedule C or F for the previous taxable year, that's going to qualify them under the umbrella of sole proprietor. So we'll talk about incorporated folks in a minute, but for the sole proprietor, you must have filed a Schedule C or F for the prior taxable year. And again, we'll go through some different scenarios. One question that has come up quite a bit already is, what if someone just started a business this year? Unfortunately, they don't qualify yet because the law was very specific in that you had already had to have uh, a sole proprietorship in existence and have already filed the taxes for the prior year and have proof of that. We have, however, accepted if someone has been in business for more than 1 year. So if they have filed, let's say, 2016 taxes and have a Schedule C or F and have an extension form for 2017 and can show that they're still uh, going to file the same for 2017. Um, I know that situation has come up already as well. But again, a newly formed business in 2018, they're going to have to wait and file 2018 taxes and have this proof of sole proprietorship before they'll be eligible for small group. Can we advance? So the definition also clarified and expanded small employer to include corporations or limited liability companies that average only one individual during the preceding calendar year. So, in other words, if a S corp, generally speaking, or an LLC is has a sole shareholder or sole member, that person can also now purchase small group coverage. For the corporation, the individual has to be the sole shareholder or an immediate family member of the shareholder, and for an LLC, the sole member or immediate family member of the sole member. And this, we're going to go through some examples later on that Tim's going to walk you through um, where this language about family, a lot of questions have come up about husband-wife groups and how this applies to a lot of different situations on how people may have structured their business. Um, but Mark, can you advance this again?
Yep.
And so here is the additional documentation that you would need to provide for those uh, corporations or LLC groups that are sole shareholder or sole member. So again, all of our regular small group enrollment documentation still applies. So you would use our standard group application, member applications, or enrollment spreadsheet. But for each of these situations, we're going to require some additional documentation. So for the sole proprietor, we mentioned the Schedule C or F. We will also accept the Schedule E from the prior taxable year. For partnerships, S corporations, or LLC, we are going to need the K1. The K1 is provided to the individual, and it lays out what their percentage of ownership is. So there's a couple of boxes on the K1 that show what percentage of the corporation that the individual owns, and of course they would need to own 100% in order to be eligible under this new expansion definition. And for a C corp, you would need a most recently filed CEC or W-2. Again, that's going to be probably a little bit more unusual that you would have a C corp that's a one-person C corp, but it's certainly a possibility. I think that we've been seeing and we'll see more of the Schedule C and F sole proprietors, and then the K1 incorporated self-employed. We have updated the Optima Commercial Broker Guide that's on the optimahealth.com website under the broker portal. So we did update that to reflect all the expansion of this definition, and it includes all the additional documentation and outlines those things for you. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and he's going to walk through some very specific common scenarios that we've been seeing a lot already. and what some documentation is required there, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thanks,
Tim?
Donna. Hope everyone can hear me. I'm going to walk you through a couple of scenarios here. Some are pretty straightforward. Some have some twists in them, but just want to caution everyone, this is not an exhaustive list of all the scenarios that we're going to encounter. Matter of fact, we're getting calls on a regular basis. Hey, what about this? What about that? But we thought we'd give a quick stab at some typical scenarios that you might see out in the field. And the first one is really the impetus for the law. It's that single employee owner that doesn't have any employees, so certainly they fall under the sole proprietor portion of the law, and you can see the related documentation. Donna went through the various forms and submissions that you're going to need, the Schedule C, F, E, K1, and the various other collateral materials that you may need with those documents. In addition to that, we've also supplied you with what you would need to enroll. So it's the usual suspects along with the additional documentation for that sole proprietor. The second scenario is a little trickier. The first part, I think, is pretty easy. So you have an owner, and that owner has at least one employee. Well, in that scenario, you have a two-person group, right? So no different than what we've done in the past. It's a small group. And you've got the various forms that you would need to submit with that, 100% owner and one owner being shown through that documentation. And then again, with the documents needed to enroll, you would see on the far right, again, the usual suspects along with the documentation for the ownership. Now, what's happened is, and I think this is an unintended consequence of the law, is in this second scenario, what happens if either the employer or the employee waives coverage? So now you're really talking about a oxymoron, one-person group, right? But a one-person group, and we are in the process of getting more guidance in these type of situations. So if you have one of these, please contact your sales rep, your Optima sales rep, and tell them what the scenario is. We will be communicating to our internal staff here very shortly about the guidance that we get. So stay tuned on that one, and we'll move to the next one. And the next one is pretty clear, and I'll explain why. Spousal partners that have no employees. On the onset of this law, the carriers submitted questions to the BOI, and one of the questions that was submitted was in this particular situation. And they responded, the BOI responded to the carriers from an administrative letter dated June the 4th. And one of the questions that they responded to was, and I'm going to read directly from the letter to you, does the bill permit plans to enroll joint owners of a mom and pop business in small group coverage? And the answer is no. If they are both owners of the corporation or both partners in an LLC, there is no sole shareholder or sole member, and thus no employees under the new law. The answer goes a little further into detail, but like I said, it's pretty cut and dried in this particular scenario where you have both owners. Now, the last scenario here is a little different. So you have spousal partners, but at least one of those is an employee, and it can be related. So again, if you have spousal partners and one's listed as an employee, it's a small group. And you can see the related collateral materials that you would need for ownership, and then the usual suspects for enrollment with Optima, as well as the additional documents needed for ownership. Again, this is not an exhaustive look at all the scenarios. We're getting them on a regular basis. If you have something that comes up during the course of business, hey, I'm not sure about this because it's a square peg, round hole, it doesn't really fit into any of these scenarios, please contact your sales rep. Again, we're trying to update them as we go along. We can't think of all the scenarios, and we're getting calls on a regular basis that we're having to clear through our compliance and legal teams. So that's where we are today with the different scenarios. And I think, Mark, if we want to go ahead and open it for questions, we'd be more than welcome to do that.
Okay, well, the first question before I mute everybody is going to be from me, because I think we were thinking we could do a mom and pop group, and we can do it, it sounds like, but only if there's 100% ownership
Yes,
and one of the spouses is the employee.
correct.
Okay, all right. All right.
Or you would be able to, if there is 100% ownership, they could be written on one contract as employee spouse.
Right.
So
But that,
you could have
so
two
then is
different
that,
types of scenarios under the same husband. Wife owns the business, the husband doesn't work in the business, she's still 100% self-employed. So they could be employee spouse on a contract.
that'd
Or
be like
you might have
that'd be like a sole proprietor though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
exactly, but a self-employed individual. So the expansion really, sole proprietor is that very specific definition of, I don't have a corporation, but I'm in business for myself, versus the incorporated owner that has a different business structure, a different tax structure. And so if you had a sole member owner of a LLC and they were married, they would be able to cover their spouse, but it's going to be on one contract. If you happen to have a husband and wife that one of them is the 100% owner and the other one happens to work in the business but doesn't own any, then they could have a choice of either one contract or two contracts. But if they jointly own, if both spouses have any portion of ownership, then that's the exclusion.
Okay. I'm going to unmute and open up the floor. Okay. You should be able to ask a question now if you haven't muted your own phone. Anybody in my office, can they chime in just so I can make sure?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Anybody, any broker have a question for Tim or Donna?
I have a question. When they talk about having an employee, are we talking about an employee that is full-time, or how do they address the part-time employee that may be working 15 hours a week and not eligible for coverage? When it says no employees, I want to just get clarification exactly what does that mean?
Donna, Tim, did you hear Dottie's question?
Yeah, and Donna can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're counting part-timers here. What we're looking for is eligible employees. So under the law, the hours worked, they would have to be a full-time employee.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Any other
That was
questions?
pleasant.
Sound effect.
Okay.
And I think in a lot of these situations, what will be helpful to talk through is really what you're trying to accomplish. In other words, is the employee, working the minimum number of hours to be eligible for coverage? Are they trying to get coverage, or is it just the one owner and they're the ones just trying to get coverage. So that's really also helpful to us, is when we can frame the intent, then we can try to go through the flow chart and figure out what box it fits in, because like Tim mentioned, every situation seems to be a little bit different. And it's all new territory, because a lot of the situations aren't as clear cut as we would think. And so just understanding what you're trying to accomplish with that group is very helpful.
You guys okay if we save this as a PDF and email it out?
Donna?
I think we might want to do a little bit of additional clarification on maybe this chart in a few areas that we have identified after we had a meeting on some of this today. So if we could wait just a little bit, we'd like to provide a little bit more clarity in some areas before we put it out to general market, if possible. And we'll try to make that happen as soon as we can.
Okay.
Mark
Yes.
or Donna, Dan Chamberlain, a PDF would be great, and I know you want to make some changes, but the sooner the better.
We'll absolutely.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Okay. All right, Tim, Donna, thanks so much. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Any questions on this, feel free to contact myself, Jennifer, Terry. If I don't talk to you between now and then, have a great 4th of July holiday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, bud.
Bye.